Have you ever asked yourself the question, am I autistic yet? Well, I'm about to in this week's episode of The Carl King Show. Understanding is useful, so here we go. I'm Carl King, and this is The Carl King Show, where every week, except for this one, we learn about music, filmmaking, and creativity. If you like this show, head over to patreon.com/Carl King and join for just $1 or $5 per month. Or send a tip through PayPal or Venmo to username Carl Kingdom. Special thank you to my illusionist, $51 level patrons, Hank Howard III, Sean Motley, and Chubode. Quick shout out to my music endorsements, Vienna Symphonic Library, Fractal Audio, Ernie Ball Strings, Toontrack, and Millennia Media. Now, let's get this episode beginned. Very good friends of Carl King, before we get started, I want to admit that I overlooked the 1-year anniversary of this show. I relaunched this whole thing barely over a year ago on 7/7/22 with episode 18. And that one was called How to Sell a Effing Audiobook, Holy Mountain, and Titan. And I would probably cringe listening back to it. I know it was unfocused, mostly improvised, and I had no actual structure for organizing my thoughts. But I committed to simply do it and learn along the way like I do with everything. And it has evolved and changed quite a bit. I've never actually stuck to a single project/process for this long. And the weekly thinking and writing, which is a process of organizing my thoughts clearly, is paying off. I think I've learned a lot. That makes this the 50th episode since the relaunch. So congratulations to me and to you for making it all happen. Now, coincidentally, this 50th episode since the relaunch is going to be one very long Carl King, the Human Update, because for once, it's all about Carl King, the human. No film, no music, and no talk about creativity. Instead, I'm going to talk about my experiences with what I believe is autism. Now, I'm not officially diagnosed, but I'm looking into that. And I'm making this episode for 3 reasons. First, to clarify and collect all of my thoughts on it for my own understanding. And second, it might be helpful during a diagnosis. And third, maybe it will help others understand me and themselves. Now, here's the tricky part. I believe that I have 2 separate things going on that are intertwined: PTSD and autism. So it's hard to pull them apart and look at them separately. I've been in PTSD therapy for years, and that could be its own episode of the show. So today, I want to try to focus on what I think are my autistic traits. Now, what is my history with all of this, and why am I talking about it now? Well, first of all, I suspect both of these things, some form of autism and PTSD, run in my family. And I won't go into those details here, but from what I know, there is a genetic component to both. Second, back in 2006, someone tried to warn me that I had Asperger's syndrome. And I was not ready to hear that because, hey, I'm not weird. I'm gifted. And there's no way that the problem could be me. My social issues are because of other people and their stupid problems. And the name itself made me cringe. Asperger's? What's that, a person with burgers in their ass? Years ago, when I suggested to a friend that I might have Asperger's syndrome, he laughed like I'm doing now and said, Yo, you got a burger in your butt? Deep down, I knew there was some truth to it, but there was no way I could stand to publicly have the label Asperger's. The good news is the term Asperger's has since been phased out. It's no longer its own thing, so people with Asperger's are now technically included in plain old autism. Third, this might seem suspect, but I started taking this topic seriously again just a few months ago, thanks to, of all things, the TikTok algorithm. Once I started scrolling on that thing, it did not take long for it to feed me an avalanche of autism videos. And the more I saw people sharing their personal experiences and diagnosis, I just went, okay, fine. And it was surprising to hear how many people had the same experience of the algorithm detecting their autism before they did. And their sort of coming out makes me feel a little bit safer doing the same. Fourth, autism describes a collection of my traits in a way that nothing else does. And it connects a lot of dots for me. Personally, it's been a bit of a relief. Fifth, in what ways am I normal? Well, I'm normal in most ways. If you look at the human race from a bigger perspective, maybe from outer space, we're mostly the same, far more than we are different. We like to notice the differences, but there aren't that many. And I try to remember that these labels or neurotypes don't entirely define us. So as we think about this topic, don't get caught up in false binaries and all or nothing absolutes. Now, here are some fears I have about making this episode. Number one, the fear that my friends and family won't believe me. I imagine they'll say, Carl, you're only being dramatic and neurotic and thinking something is wrong with you when there's not. First it was the veganism, then the PTSD, and now all of this autism stuff. Why are you always trying to be weird? And number two, the fear of clients, potential employers, or collaborators thinking I might be incompetent or dangerous because of the cliches attached to the word autism. Like, oh, he's autistic? I don't want to deal with that. And that's unfortunate because not only am I an extremely productive workaholic, I've had the same job for 15 years as the lead video producer for a multi-million-dollar company. And that's all to say, I've helped make other people a lot of money. And on a personal level, I worry, will people avoid me or not want to be my friend? Well, the word autism can mean so many things because there are so many flavors of autism. Number three, this is a long shot and probably just paranoia, but I fear that if someday I'm accused of a crime, are people more likely to think I'm guilty because they don't understand neurodivergent people? Well, with the number of times that I've been blamed for things I didn't do simply because I'm different, all the way back to high school, this is a valid concern. So who knows? Maybe my fear will take over and I'll delete this episode. Now, here are three more things to know before we get started. Number one, the necessary disclaimer. I am no expert on autism, so don't look to some guy on social media for scientific information. I'm just a person sharing his experiences. Number two, there's a term you've probably heard, on the spectrum. And I think there might be a misunderstanding there. According to Dr. Crystal Lee, a psychologist in Los Angeles, autism is not a single linear dimension from left to right, from 0% autistic to 100% autistic. It's more like 8 different dimensions: social skills, fixations, routines, sensory issues, stimming, perception, executive function, and other. And it's kind of like a mixing board with multiple faders instead of just one fader. And there's also a saying, if you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Now, is this meme about autism scientific? I can't say that it is, but it seems to make sense to me for now. And number 3, there is a stereotype of what autistic people look and act like. So some people like to say, wow, you don't look autistic. Well, autistic people don't have to look or act autistic. And that's just another stereotype, like those attached to races and genders. But it's also hard to see autism because of something called masking, which I will talk about a little bit later. So here we go. I'm going to break my own experiences up into 5 different categories: social stuff, sensory stuff, repetitive behaviors and lifestyle, special interests, and stimming. The first area in which I have autistic traits is social stuff. Now remember, I have a lot of what you'd think are neurotypical traits. I love my friends and family, and I will do anything for them. I love hanging out with either one person or a small group, laughing at absurdist comedy, and having deep discussions. If someone wants to get lunch or dinner with me, I am all in. But if they want me to go to a party, the answer is probably no. So I want to dispel this myth of me being antisocial and never wanting to be around people. That's just not accurate, and it's definitely not nuanced. So here we go. Around 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, it felt like all the other kids were starting to relate and communicate on a level I didn't understand. I didn't get their jokes and the references to things, and I couldn't detect subtext or interpret their intentions from their behavior, so I was very easily tricked and bullied. Throughout the rest of my life, I've been forced to decipher and learn an alien language. So, for instance, through years of trial and error, I figured out that I needed to smile and laugh to make strangers comfortable and say small talk phrases, or at least try to. And from a young age, I had what is called a flat affect. And that's when people don't express many emotions on the surface. The funny term for it is resting bitch face. On the first day of 4th grade, the teacher asked us to go around the room and introduce ourselves. And I said, "I'm Carl King, and I like robots." And the whole room erupted in laughter. And I had no idea why they were laughing. In 7th grade, I got the nickname Druggy, or Drugged. And kids called me Carl Drugged King because I spoke with low energy and a monotone. But I noticed it too, and I tried to nickname myself Drone because I thought my voice sounded robotic. And as we know, I liked robots, so I didn't really mind that, but I didn't want to be called Drugged or Druggy. My sister referred to me as her little brother in a coma because I didn't talk much, and I was okay playing with my Star Wars toys alone in the other room. At least, that's how I remember it. And years later, I exaggerated the whole low-energy monotone voice as my Sir Millard Mulch persona. As a young adult, I was too direct in my speech. I didn't know you weren't supposed to simply say all the things that are true. And I didn't have manners or much understanding of what was polite or rude. And I didn't know about using tact, so people kicked me out of their houses without explanation, and I never knew what I was doing wrong. They just wanted me gone. I was 100% baffled by this, and I'm still somewhat baffled by it. I even have a song about it called Get Out of My House on my first Sir Millard Mulch CD. The kids around me continued developing socially, and it wasn't until I was about 17 that it occurred to me that people could be manipulative or lie. And my peers could create and navigate layers of deception as if it were normal, which blew my mind. I was such a gullible, sincere kid. I thought, wait a minute, everyone is lying about things? But lying is bad, isn't it? And that was a major disillusionment. And it took me a while to trust anyone again. And years later, when I saw The Truman Show, it resonated with me deeply. When I was in college, thinking that it would improve my social situation, I tried acting more energetic and interesting, but it just came off jerky and abrupt. I would laugh too loud and very suddenly at a yelling volume, and my outbursts of laughter startled people. I also didn't know how to stand or where to put my hands. Do I put them in my pockets, or do I put them on my hips like this? Do I just let them hang there? Or if I'm making a YouTube show, should I wave them around like I'm moving ideas from one place to another? I still get criticized for not talking enough in groups. Is there something wrong with Carl? And people call me shy. And on the back of my book, my publisher actually described me as, quote, the shyest guy in the room. And I never said that, and I don't know who did, but it bugged me because I don't think I'm shy. And what's actually happening is this. I simply don't understand when it's my turn to talk in a group. One person said something. Does that mean I now say something? Oh, whoops. Another person is talking now. Now I can't say what I was going to because the subject already changed. And now I need to throw that first sentence away and think of something else to say. And I mainly don't want to interrupt or say something that doesn't belong. So group conversations are stressful and confusing for me. I find myself constantly apologizing and asking if it's okay for me to say something now. Neurotypicals, whatever those are, seem to absorb this understanding of social cues and pacing and rhythm and context at an early age, almost through osmosis, and I never did. These days, to avoid making people uncomfortable, I try to give genuine compliments and act more friendly. I ask questions, and I try to be less direct in my statements. I feel compelled to prove that I'm harmless, counteracting all of this natural behavior that I have. Giving social cues is difficult for me, but I think I'm getting better. And this is all to say that a large part of my social behavior is a forced skill. I can't just be myself. In the world of autism, this is officially called masking. And over several decades, I have worked to change my social behavior deliberately. I've learned, don't act like yourself, because if you do, you will be disliked and punished. So I put on a mask that appears to be more neurotypical. I try to act in a way that is expected of me, but that is not actually who I am. People then like to say, well, everyone masks. Yes, but not for the reason that I do, or maybe an autistic person does. I do it because I have been endlessly mocked and traumatized simply by being me. And from what I understand, autistic females are more adept at this masking skill than males due to social pressures and other factors. And that's why earlier understandings of autism were based on studying autistic males. Now, when I'm not masking, when I'm being myself, whatever that is, I just feel blank. But when I'm thinking or daydreaming about an abstract shape or rhythm or puzzle that I'm trying to solve, I look pissed off. And when I'm overwhelmed by sensory input, my ability to mask just goes away. I can't smile and I can't laugh. So I end up looking like that little brother in a coma again. And when in that state, I can't send the constant signal to other people that everything is okay. I shut down. And in those situations, I am panicking inside. Because of how I naturally seem on the surface, people are afraid to have fun around me. It's like a curse. And it might have something to do with my declaration of war on fun as Dr. Zoltan in 2008. But that whole thing was only an exaggeration of the real me. Since I didn't feel I could safely say those things out loud, I was trying to express how frustrated I was at the time not fitting in when I moved to Los Angeles. The people around me seemed to only care about parties and networking. So I was intellectually defending my right to be myself, ironically while wearing a wig and funny goggles. But even when not playing a character, I've been called conspicuous. For example, I went to a Warrant concert in my 20s. Remember those guys with the song Cherry Pie? Well, the singer, Janie Lane, called me out from the stage during a song's intro. Dude, why are you just standing there staring? Are you okay? Do you need a beer? A joint? Great. Now the whole audience is looking at me, which is not traumatic at all. During the guitar solo, Janie jumped into the audience and put his arm around me, rocking out, and he pretended to smoke a joint and pass it back and forth with me. It was an honor, but it was another example of being singled out in front of everyone for being weird or having something wrong with me. That wasn't the first or last time that has happened. And I think some people have a radar for it and want to out me in front of everyone. Maybe because they're uncomfortable with someone being different from them. And this, of course, led to me getting bullied constantly in high school. Being unusual or conspicuous, I was an easy target. To this day, I have an intense fear of being called out by performers who do crowd work. You know, when they can't come up with their own material and need to hassle the audience. For instance, I experienced severe anxiety at a Blue Man Group show in Las Vegas. And in those situations, I try to make myself very small and hide in my seat. I cannot enjoy myself in those situations because I can't stop thinking, please, please, please leave me alone. I want the show to be over so that I can escape. And in my everyday life, I try not to attract any attention to myself or give people a reason to hassle me. Now, here are some other things I still struggle with. Number one, I overlook the social meaning of group activities because I just think of them as a project to complete. The faster, the better. I figure then we can be done with the task and relax. And I overlook the whole having an experience together part. I've always dreaded group projects in school and couldn't work on a team. Why? Because it's inefficient. If it's a project I want to do, I can usually get it done faster without other people. It's hard for me to remember that the point isn't to just finish the task, it's to collaborate. And I'm supposed to be social and connected like all the other normal humans. Well, that's hard for me because it splits my brain in two. I struggle to focus on two things simultaneously, working on the project and working with others. They're just not the same thing for me, and it's multitasking. That's why I've fought for a career where I work alone as much as possible, doing everything myself. Number two, when having a conversation, I forget to answer people or continue the back and forth, both in person and through email. I think people feel like they tossed me a ball, and instead of catching it and throwing it back, I just watched it hit the ground and wandered away, and that makes them feel ignored. In person or on the phone, on some microscopic level, I forget to talk, and that creates these little gaps that other people would typically fill. And it seems that others have an endless flow. They fill space with words that just come out of them naturally. Well, nothing comes out of me naturally in conversation. There's nothing on my inner teleprompter. I've got to go into my brain and frantically type the next sentence. And because of this, I try to rehearse sentences in my mind very quickly before saying them. Number three, eye contact paralyzes me. If I look at someone's eyes, I can't think. I have to look away to be able to talk or even listen. And it doesn't matter who it is. It even helps me to close my eyes to talk. So I do that sometimes in phone calls. I used to wear sunglasses on stage because seeing people's eyes made me forget what I was playing. It's like eye contact erases my brain temporarily. And as extra credit, here's a true oddity that even I don't understand. I don't know why this is, but I have a major hang-up with Trader Joe's cashiers asking me if I have any plans for the evening. It's because I honestly don't have a good answer for them. Someone I follow on TikTok called this a sudden amnesia, and that makes me super anxious. And last thing in this category, I want to say that I do have a high tolerance and even a preference for lots of alone time. I immerse myself in thinking and creative projects and probably only need maybe an hour a day of interaction. I try to call my mom every day, and I call my friends regularly, and I enjoy it. So I like my important people to be around, but I enjoy doing my own thing. It just feels natural to me. I do start to get lonely if I don't interact with people for a few days, but in general, I like to be in my own world, and I've designed my lifestyle and career around that. The second area in which I have autistic traits is sensory stuff. As I go through my day, my brain seems to overprocess my senses. Imagine if things like your hearing and sight and touch were cranked way up to the point of being kind of painful. It's not really a physical pain, but an odd sort of mental pain. And it makes it difficult for me to leave my controlled environment. So here they are. Number one, sound. Alarms or devices beeping, cars revving, cell phones vibrating, dogs barking, music playing, or random people talking becomes amplified in my brain, even if they are at low volumes. It makes it so I can't think, and I need to make the sound stop or leave the area. And I go out of my mind when strangers play sounds on their cell phones that I didn't agree to hear. And it's the same when a restaurant or a store has their music too loud, which is always. I keep earplugs with me when I go out in public, and some places I just plain old can't go in. Once in a while, a room will have too much reverb when I talk, and it confuses my brain. If I'm in those situations for too long, my brain gets zapped, I freeze up, and it can take me hours to recover. Number 2, crowds. I am acutely aware of all the people around me. So if there are people, I am aware of them. And I can't block them out, especially if they're making sounds. Now, bookstores and libraries where people are expected to be quiet are much less taxing for me. But concerts or sporting events are nearly impossible for me to be in. Crowds are a continual blast of white noise in my brain. Whenever I go to an event like a wedding, where rows of chairs are tightly packed and I'm jammed up against people on every side, it is hell for me because I don't want to feel other people moving and for other people to feel me moving. I just don't want to experience other people breathing or wiggling around. I can't fly on planes without Xanax because of that sardine factor. Number 3, rooms with no sound and no air circulation. If I'm in a room, there needs to be a fan, even if it's not blowing directly on me. Air needs to be moving around somehow, and there needs to be a low level of ambient noise like an AC. I can't do anything or think about anything else if there's no air moving or no white noise. Number 4, lights. They're not as big of a problem for me as sound. I definitely don't like flashing or bright lights, but the worst of all for me are those old school office fluorescents. They pulsate and just burn my brain, and I feel like I'm about to faint. Number 5, touching. As I've mentioned before, being in proximity to people can be challenging for me, and it took me a long time to be okay with casual hugging. In high school, it terrified me. A girl once tried to hug me just to see what would happen, and I screamed and I struggled and I ran away. And I'm fine with it now, but the sensation of touch can still be too intense a lot of the time. Number 6, taste. I brush my teeth probably 10 times a day, and I'm not joking. Not because I want my teeth to be clean or because I'm OCD. It's because if I don't brush every couple of hours, my mouth will taste bad, and I won't be able to stop thinking about it. Number 7, being observed. When people are watching me or aware of me, I can't focus. It bugs me when a person wanders up near me in public and gives indirect cues like whistling a tune to themselves or smacking their lips and sighing. And people walking behind me is also a big problem. And very similar to this, when driving, I don't like cars driving behind me. And you can imagine how ridiculous that must be. So if I'm not on a major road or interstate, I pull over into a parking lot so they will go away. And I do this every single day. My path driving from one place to another can become complicated. Number 8, broken fingernails. If I chip a nail and have a piece hanging off, I panic. Even a microscopic sharp edge that touches my clothes is intolerable. The sensation is overwhelming, as if I have cockroaches in my clothes. So I keep nail clippers around in the car, bedroom, office, and I stash them everywhere else just in case. Now, the thing is, this rarely happens, but it's so unpleasant that I want to avoid feeling it. Number 9 is sitting in the sun. I can't do it. I can walk in the sun. I can bike in the sun, although I wear a hat and even heavy sunscreen if I'm in direct sunlight for long, like on my summer bike rides. But my point is that the sun hitting me while I'm sitting there is another very bad sensation, even if it's not hot sunlight, and I just want it to stop. And these are just a few of the more entertaining examples. There are more. And I think almost everyone has some sort of sensory thing that bugs them. A common one is nails on a chalkboard. But my list is extensive, and they all feel like someone is poking my brain with a stick over and over. And that makes doing normal, everyday things tricky. Just leaving the house, I have to think, well, which of these sensations is going to defeat me first? And there's only so much sensory overload I can handle in one day. Maybe an hour at most, and then I am wiped out. It's also difficult to predict the intensity of my sensory problems on any given day. One day I'm fine, the next day I am not. I might think I can handle a situation, and then it turns out I can't. And sometimes if I'm in the right mood, I can be in a loud place and have no problem at all. And I know that can be hard for other people to make sense of, or predict, or understand. And I think all of these sensory issues aside, I also seem to process experiences quickly. If I do go out to a concert, which is almost never, I might only need to see one or two songs, and I get the idea. I experienced it, and that's enough for me. And personally, I don't mind that, because more of the same thing doesn't make me enjoy it more. And that can be super confusing to other people. I'm just happy to go sit in the car and read. You might meet me out in the wild and not realize any of this. People who have known me for years might not know I have these things going on. At most, you might think, Carl has some unusual rules or hang-ups or limitations, or the occasional extreme reaction like needing to leave a place abruptly. That's because I try to hide what I'm going through to avoid more problems and conflict, and it makes me feel guilty to have these internal experiences because it inconveniences other people. Up next, we have my repetitive behaviors and lifestyle. Carl King's life is predictable. I eat the same thing for every meal, every day, for weeks before changing it up. And I've been that way since I was a teenager. Aside from already knowing what I like, it feels relieving and safe. So I figure out what I like, and then I eat it over and over. For example, back in college, I went to the same Burger King at the same time every morning for months. And I didn't even need to order. They'd see my van pulling into the parking lot and get the food ready for me. Without even realizing it, my current pattern is drinking a certain brand of canned sparkling water. I buy them in bulk, and it's all I drink all day, and I've been doing it for weeks. I'm also that way with clothing. I wear my same uniform of t-shirts and shorts every day when I'm not podcasting. I buy multiples of the same exact thing, same color, same size. I want to count on my clothes being consistent because it would make me anxious if they were different shapes and materials and sizes. And that makes it difficult for someone else to shop for me. I have to say, sorry, I appreciate getting gifts, but please don't buy me clothes. Now we move on to something the autism community calls special interests. And these are subjects that autistic people fixate on, such as trains, or animals, or numbers. And in extreme cases, they learn everything there is to know about that narrow subject, and it's all they want to talk about. I have gone from one special interest to the next since I was a teenager. I started with guitar, then graphic design, then video production, then screenwriting, then animation, then film scoring, and now making this show. And then it's like I go back to the beginning of the list and do them all again. At each point on that merry-go-round, I want to rebrand myself and think, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. I don't want to do those other things anymore. And I say it every time when in each of those phases, it's all I think and talk about. If I'm in a more manic stage of my fixation on a topic, I struggle to be interested in other things. And if something interrupts or distracts me from my current fixation, I can get irritable. And that's another factor of my personality that's hard to predict. The good part is, because of this, I've developed most of these skills to a professional level and can say I've had success in each, because I like trying to make money from my special interests. So some of them have paid well, and some of them only led to great opportunities. At the very least, graphic design and video production have each turned into long-lasting, well-paying careers. So I want to say thank you to my tendency to fixate. Now, onto this thing called stimming, which refers to self-stimulating. In the world of autism, these are behaviors like rocking back and forth or doing a fluttering thing with your eyes. It's a way of self-regulating your internal state. I don't think I do much stimming except for one noticeable thing. I wiggle my toes in patterns. My wife will ask me, "What's going on with your toes? Why are you doing that over and over?" Well, because I need to. I rub my toes and feet together nonstop. And I actually wrote this in my script. I'm actually doing it right now while typing this. So the question is, am I autistic yet? We don't know yet. In the meantime, I'm going to work on getting diagnosed, and I will also keep learning. If anything in this episode resonated with you, send me a message or comment and tell me if you identify with this stuff or have been diagnosed with autism. And it will let me know that other people are going through the same thing. Okay, that's the end of this episode of The Carl King Show. Remember to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or anywhere else you consume these dang episodes. And if you like this show, support the creation of more episodes by joining my Patreon for $1 or $5 a month. That's patreon.com/Carl King. Or send a tip through PayPal or Venmo to username Carl Kingdom. Thank you to my little production team, my script editor, Chris Higgins, and my transcriptionist, Eric Alexander Moore. My Patreon patrons help me also pay those guys. And a special thank you to my $51 a month patrons at the special illusionist level, Chubode, Sean Motley, and Hank Howard III. And thank you to all of the very good friends of Carl King for joining me. And as I always say, I've got to go to the bathroom.